in the Alfie Evans case from Great Britain. So I wanted to talk a little bit about a counter-argument that's being made with regard to Alfie Evans. You'll recall that Alfie Evans is the 23-month-old baby who has an undiagnosed brain condition, a degenerative brain condition that has left him with apparently 30% brain function. And his parents want to take him out of Great Britain and bring him to Italy for experimental treatment. And the British government has said, no, he must die here in this hospital. They have now removed him from life support. He's now going on, I believe, 3 days without life support. They said he was going to die right away. And now he's still alive, right? He's still breathing. Apparently, his dad has been giving him mouth-to-mouth in the hospital. Let's just start with this. If mom and dad were at home and they had a kid with a brain condition and they were deliberately refusing that kid water, they would be brought up on charges of child abuse and possible homicide. Instead, because this is being done in a hospital, everybody says that it's okay. But now Alfie's family has issued a statement. Okay, the statement is this note to supporters asking them to stand down as they negotiate with the hospital. Why? Because apparently, according to the UK Telegraph, Alfie's doctors told reporters that Alfie's parents must make a sea change in their attitude toward the medical system holding their son hostage. Quote, instead, the judge said the best Alfie's parents could hope for was to explore the options of removing him from intensive care to either a ward, a hospice, or his home. But a doctor treating Alfie, who cannot be named for legal reasons, said that for Alfie to be allowed home would require a sea change in attitude from the child's family, and they feared that in the worst case, they would try to take the boy abroad. I mean, this is an astonishing claim that somehow the parents have to evidence a sea change in their attitude. It's their kid who's dying. Okay, when Alfie dies, which he probably will, when Alfie dies, it will not be any of these doctors visiting his grave. It will not be any of the bureaucrats or the judges visiting his grave. It will be Alfie Evans' parents who are going there to bring flowers and pray for him. They're apparently devout Catholics. And this idea that they have to change their attitude toward the government demonstrates once again that this is all about treating the government as God, not at all about the best interests of the child. So Alfie's parents have now told media on Thursday afternoon they plan to meet with Alfie's doctors as soon as possible. Alder-Hey Hospital withdrew Alfie's life support on Monday. The child has survived breathing on his own with only minimal help since then. So according to the statement from Kate James and Tom Evans, the parents, they say, I wish to make a statement on behalf of myself and Kate. Our lives have been turned upside down by the intense focus on Alfie and his situation. Our little family, along with Alder-Hey, has become the center of attention for many people around the world. It has meant we have not been able to live our lives as we would like. We are very grateful and we appreciate all the support we've received from around the world, including from our Italian and Polish supporters who have dedicated their time and support to our incredible fight. We would now ask you to return back to your everyday lives and allow myself, Kate, and Alder-Hey to form a relationship, build a bridge, and walk across it. It sounds like a hostage statement. It sounds like a hostage statement. The UK healthcare system is holding this kid hostage and holding the parents hostage unless they're nice about things. So what is the counter case? Let's try and take the best possible counter case being presented by the medical left in Britain. So their case is that Alfie is suffering by being alive, and the best thing that can happen for him is to die quickly and quietly in the most humane possible fashion, right? This is really the case that they are making. They're making the case for euthanasia of Alfie, or at least the case for removing him from life support. The difference between euthanasia and removal from life support is, of course, the level of activity undertaken by the doctors. In euthanasia, then they give you a cocktail of drugs and you die. In this particular case, they're withdrawing life support and hoping that Alfie dies quickly. I mean, I don't mean that facetiously. They are hoping that Alfie dies quickly and in as little pain as possible. There's a phrase that's been kicked around by a lot of folks on the medical left and in the bureaucracy in Britain. And it's a phrase that's been repeated now by the judge in this particular case. It's been repeated by the staff at Alder-Hey Hospital. It's been repeated by NHS doctors writing for the UK Guardian. And that is death with dignity, which is a euthanasia phrase, death with dignity. Okay, so here, for example, the hospital said that their goal was to kill Alfie with dignity. Judge Hayden, who's the presiding judge in this case, talks similarly of dignity. An NHS doctor named Rachel Clark wrote in an op-ed for the UK Guardian, quote, withdrawal of care is neither killing nor murder, but enables a patient to die with comfort and dignity. So we have to actually distinguish between two particular terms. One is comfort and the other is dignity. Now, it is possible to objectively determine whether someone is going to die in more or less comfort. Okay, I can tell that as a third party. And my wife, who works at a hospital, we were talking about this case yesterday, and she was talking about, some of the ways that she's seen people die, and they are horrific. They're absolutely horrendous. I mean, there are certainly cases in which people would have died with more comfort if they had been moved to a hospice 2 weeks before their death and then been given morphine as they transition from life, right? I mean, that would be, there's no question that people die in a myriad range of unfortunate and horrifying ways. So if your top priority is somebody dying with comfort, then you can say, okay, we want Alfie to die with comfort, and the experimental treatment will be too painful, and so we're arguing with the parents that they are not keeping the best interests of the child at heart, because what they really are doing is extending they're not extending his chances of getting better. They're making him suffer more, and we don't want him to suffer more. So our best interests are more aligned with the best interests of the child. That argument, I don't think, is a dispositive one. I don't even think it's a particularly good one. But I do think that it's an argument that has some merit and it has some weight. Because again, I can assess as a third party whether you are in comfort or whether you are not in comfort. Anyone can tell that. But dignity is a different thing. And the left has been equating comfort and dignity for a while. And this is a materialistic conception of what life constitutes. Right? If you believe that comfort in life and dignity in life are the same thing, or comfort in death and dignity in death are the same thing, then that's a pretty materialistic vision of what exactly life is. Because dignity then is boiled down to the level of physical comfort you are experiencing at any given time. Right? That if you are a person who's on your deathbed and you choose to suffer all the way through your last moments because you want to cling to life, because you think life is just that important, and you think that it is important that your children know that you struggled all the way to your last breath because you think that life is worth clinging to and you should never give up even when the situation is hopeless, if that's a lack of dignity, according to some people on the left, because the most dignified thing would be just die in comfort, because comfort and dignity are the same thing. But obviously, they are not the same thing. A death with comfort, again, is something that can be objectively determined. We can know that a woman who's dying of a bowel obstruction and is choking on her own stool, right? We know that that person is dying with less comfort. But can you honestly say that person is dying with less dignity? I'm not sure that you can. Because dignity is a state of mind relative to both yourself and to others. Right? If you treat yourself in dignified fashion, that means that you are acting in accordance with your own personal values. That's, I think, the definition of dignity with regard to yourself, that you have a set of values and you are standing by those no matter what the risk. That is the definition of dignity in accordance with yourself. Dignity with regard to others is how well you maintain your standard of stolidity in the face of serious pain. Whenever we talk about the kind of stiff British upper lip, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about that sort of dignity. They're not talking about comfort. They're talking about how much suffering can you take without actually becoming a burden on others. Right? I'm talking about an emotional burden on others. Okay, but to equate comfort and dignity is a real mistake, because great men and women die in horrible agony on a regular basis. Right? Great men and women very often are trying to make a point by dying in agony, that they don't actually want to, they don't actually want to give up on life. Life is more than just the level of physical comfort they're experiencing at a given time. Dying with comfort might be a term that's applicable to this baby, right? To Alfie. You might say that, maybe Alfie should die in more comfort than his parents want him to die in. Dying with dignity doesn't apply, because Alfie is 23 months old. He doesn't have the capacity to act in accordance with his own virtuous ideas because Alfie's a baby, right? So that means that he can't act in accordance with that. And as far as dignity with regard to others, that also doesn't really apply to Alfie, because the question now is whether his parents or the state get to determine what dignity looks like. Right? Does the state get to determine that its version of dignity, i.e. comfort, is the governing standard, or do his parents get to determine what dignity looks like? Maybe they think dignity looks like you fight for life all the way until your end of your life, no matter what the consequences. Okay, well, that is certainly an open question. That's certainly a question that's subjective in nature. Right? There's no hard standard as to whether the state is right or whether his parents are right in their definition of dignity. And when in doubt, you got to go with the parents, because the parents, again, are the ones who care more about Alfie. There's a famous story about Phil Gramm. Phil Gramm is a former senator from Texas in the United States, and Phil Gramm apparently had an exchange he liked to tell about with this one leftist woman, where he was saying to her, listen, the basis for my entire politics is that I care more about my children than you do. And the woman said, that's not true. And he said, really, what are their names? Okay, that is certainly applicable here. As much as the judge says that he cares about the child, as a parent, there's no one on earth who cares as much about my child as my wife and I do. No one. Right? Not grandparents, not siblings, no one. And until you've been a parent and experienced the bond that comes along with having a child, for anyone to step in between that bond for a subjective reason, like your definition of dignity, is just absurd, and it's also fascistic. Again, there's a reason that advocates of euthanasia like to use death with dignity rather than death with comfort, because they understand that if they use death with dignity, then they're making the implicit argument that you choosing to go out on morphine is a more dignified death, that it's morally superior. Death with comfort is a morally neutral term, because comfort is morally neutral. We know people who live in comfort. Some are bad people, some are good people. Comfort is not a moral status. Dignity is, and there's a reason why the left keeps using that misnomer with regard to cases like Alfie Evans. They really should not. They really, really should not. It's a huge, huge mistake. So, again, I think that there's no question that this should be left to the parents, and it's an egregious miscarriage of justice that it's not, particularly because, again, the doctors are assessing the situation. They don't even know what's wrong with Alfie. So that's the second factor here, is that even if you assume Alfie's going to die, this should be up to the parents. The state doesn't even know that Alfie's going to die. They say they do, but they really don't know because he's been on off life support longer than they thought he would be.